Oh, good. Thank you, Dave. All good. Excited to get going today on this. There's a lot for us to cover as usual. And of course, we just want to really answer questions, right? Like that's what we're here for.
100%. No, it's going to be a good chat. So, guys, for those of you who don't know, and Robin and I have been doing this for the past few weeks. We've done every second Thursday. This is the third time, and this will be the final time we're doing it for the foreseeable future. We'll come back to it. We really want to spend some time answering your questions today. So, as you're joining in, let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're what you're doing. If you're interested in Airbnb and you've got some questions for Robin and I, that'll be really good to go through. Otherwise, Robin, what's happening in the market? What's new? What are you seeing happening in the Airbnb sector at the moment?
So, as always, there are always a couple of things. And I think here in South Africa, even though I heard that actually we're not really going to come out of this kind of state of emergency for a while still, we're definitely seeing the changes and the trends of Airbnb. You know, I've mentioned this when we first chatted. We saw guests have a tendency to book like 6 days before their actual trip starts during COVID. And kind of like as we emerged out of COVID, it was on the day they would book at the airport or they'd book when they're driving into the town, which made it very difficult for a lot of guests who did not have, or a lot of hosts who did not have automated messaging, who did not have automated systems in place, who did not have all those things sorted. It meant that they were therefore, sitting and kind of panicking. In Airbnb, we have that little function that calls instant book, which basically means a guest can choose a place, click book, and they booked, they confirmed, right? As opposed to, I want to reserve a place, because then it has to go back to the host. The host has to have a look at it, has to confirm it or pre-approve it backwards and forwards. When someone wants a place, they want it now. Sometimes they're outside your door and they're like, I want it now. And again, I say the beauty of this is that probably 40 to 50% of South Africans do not have this function. Why? Because they don't have the automation in place to handle it. They go to bed at 8 o'clock, not realizing that someone may be looking for a place that night at 8 o'clock. And in my case, because it's all automated, someone can click at 8 o'clock that night, hey, I want that place. I'm going to move. I'm ready to check in. And if I'm out watching movies, doing kite surfing, having dinner with guests or friends, I lose that booking if it's not automated. Whereas in this case, they click it. All the messaging is sent to them, the check-in instructions, everything is done. Now that is where we start taking advantage. That means that basically we're going to get access to a whole lot of opportunities that most people aren't. And that's what, on the one hand, I'm going to say I'm happy about, but I'm also kind of partly disappointed in South Africa that we really are, as property investors, as landlords, as hosts, we are not on top of the game. At least let me put it on average. I'm not referring to myself. I'm not referring to the people in our group. I'm not referring to the people that we coach and teach. We're telling people how to do this so that they actually benefit from what others are not doing. And what I really mean by that, and I've shared this so many times, that if you're still taking cell phone photographs of your property for rental or for whatever it is, yes, we can argue and say that they are getting better, right? The cell phone photographs are getting better and better. But if you're really talking about wanting to be the top of your game and to make sure you're squeezing that extra yield out of your property, be a professional. And, the whole thing is getting professional photographs is not expensive. It really isn't. But it makes a difference because people are going to look at something and choose that. I mean, take a look at online dating. It's the same scenario. If you have a blurry photograph or something's not right, the chances are no one's going to click and swipe, right on you. It's going to be something which is, oh, sorry, it doesn't look that great. Doesn't matter what your bio says. They want to know, are you the real deal? And is it appealing? And it's the same with the Airbnb. It's the same with all those kinds of things. It's those little details which set you apart. And, I was chatting to some agents today about Airbnb and how we stay on, listed on the first page and how we stay on top of our market. And I said, it's all these little things that make a big difference. It's the way we position our titles, the way we position our photographs, the kind of photographs we put in place. All these things mean that someone is going to choose me and my properties as opposed to just the average out there. And in South Africa, that's especially true. Just people do not know what to do. And, they hear this data. They hear that, people make Airbnb. And we know from our experience, not just the kind of hearsay out there, that we can expect probably twice the income on a property as a normal long-term rental would do. So if you're getting 10 grand on a normal 12-month lease, you can probably get about 20 grand on Airbnb, obviously considering some of the variables of, is it in the right place, is it run well, etc., etc. But it really is a great model, right? But if you're really wanting to have a 20% increase in occupancy rate compared to what might be out there, well, then you're going to need to know those skills and tips and techniques. And I think that's where, again, everything makes the biggest difference. So, we can chat about that. I've got some gadgets that I want to talk about as well that we use. So really, if there are no questions, I'm going to be incredibly disappointed, because this is really an opportunity for us to share stuff. So I want people to ask us the questions, because that really shows that we know what we're talking about. And of course, this gives them an insight into what they could be doing differently. And sometimes one little thing could make the whole difference for you. And I think that's what we want to open up.
Yeah, 100%. I think maybe just to reiterate what you said, there's so many ways that you can get the correct exposure on Airbnb to the right viewers. And like you said, the instant booking is one of those features that I filter by as a user, because if I can't instant book, then it doesn't work. But at the same time, I've had it where I've had the instant booking, and then the follow through from the host hasn't been there. And I rock up and I'm like, cool, I'm ready to check in. Where's everything? And they're like, oh, we didn't see your booking come through. And I'm like, I don't care. So it's really important that there's execution behind it as well, and that's what we talk about in the course, and that's what you cover in depth on your course. Is that it's not just about it's how do we get listed, how do we get featured first, but how do we deliver that quality of service? Because that person got 1 star from me and got a very snotty review, because I was there at 9 o'clock at night trying to check into my Airbnb and they weren't ready for me. And that's it. And it's so important to do the carry through and go through. We do have a question coming in. I think we'll hit some of those. Then we'll talk about some of the courses that we have available for everyone, and then hopefully some more questions are around as well. So, question from Craig: if I want to start an Airbnb in Cape Town but live in Pretoria, should I make use of a professional host to look after the property in case there are any issues which require on-site support? If so, what would the arrangement be? How much would it cost? What would they do, and so on and so forth?
So, I mean, we can just throw it out there that, like with any property management process, you can do it your own, which means you're more of an active landlord or an active property investor, which means you actually are involved in that kind of day-to-day running, or you can just outsource it to a management company. There are very few management companies out there in real estate, not just in Airbnb, that will be probably as diligent or as, I want to say as caring about it, but will have as much of a vested interest as you would. And the interest, or the rates that they are charging are going to be significantly more than a normal long-term rental management company. So usually if you've got a 12-month lease, it's a standard rental company out there, management company, they will charge between 5 and probably 7 or 5 and 10%, depending on the lease price and all that kind of stuff. In Airbnb, you're going to be looking more between 15 and 25% of your gross income that can generate. Now, there are a lot of different models that you can work around if you're going in partnership with different people, but you need to consider that, yes, there is that component that they're going to actually charge you a significant amount, which is okay if you're generating a significant amount. I don't mind paying a lot of money if I'm going to get a lot of money in return. Now, the challenge, though, is that, like I mentioned in South Africa, that there are a lot of management companies that are sprouting up, but they actually don't know how to use technology, such as all the automation that we share in the course, about how to actually make this really efficient and streamlined. So they might manage the property, but if they're still doing it manually, they're not going to be on instant book. They're not going to be able to do all that messaging and get good reviews straight away. And of course, all those different logistics aren't necessarily going to be there. So my preference, and it's the same with my whole portfolio of whether it's commercial, short-term letting, long-term rental, is still that I self-manage, right? And what I mean by self-manage is I'm still the one that's in control of everything that's going on, but I put in place all the systems and a high degree of automation so that actually I can do it myself while still not doing a lot by myself, right? That's the key. It's pointless saying, well, I want to do it myself if that means you've just got another job. That's not what we want. We want to be able to do differently, right? And Dave, you know that in a week's time, I head off on a 45-day trip to the Baviaans Cliff, and then I'm going to Indonesia, and I'm going to go and surf in the Mentawai Islands for a whole long period of time, taking my brother along with me, and everything else has to function. And there's no ways I can do that if I do not have all those systems in place and, of course, making it work. So my answer to Craig is, if you're going to outsource it, that's going to cost you a certain amount. But the thing that you would then have to check in the outsourcing, if I was doing, is like a checklist of, I would want to know, do you do this? Do you do that? How do you manage this? And I'd want to actually vet them, because just because they say they're an Airbnb property management company doesn't mean they actually know what they're doing or any good. And of course, you're the one that still is going to have the impact at the end of the day. But there is the chance as well, Dave, and we know that part of what we're chatting about here, and we said we were going to talk about the courses and that, and although that we're here to share whatever the question, the solutions are that people are asking, Craig, I'm going to speak directly to you on this, that first step would actually be to go and actually do that advanced course, because the advanced course tells you how to do it on your own. And from there, you can then choose, do I want to actually outsource this or not? Because the thing is if you do outsource it at that point, you're going to know what to look for. You're going to know how to vet them. You're going to know what they need to be doing to ensure that you're getting the returns that you want. Because as I said, I've got no problem paying money to someone if I'm going to get the return. And that is the education that you're going to be getting, which will actually enable you to make that effective choice. Should I do this on my own or should I not? And of course, all of that is in place. How to choose your cleaning company. What are the contracts to use with the cleaning company? How to sort out, leases if you're doing rent to rent with someone. All of that is covered with the templates, with actual leases, all in the course as well. Because the whole purpose of this, what we're chatting about here, is that you have the information that you need to do to go out and do it by yourself. That's how I'm sharing with you what I've done. I'm not out there just trying to promote something that I don't believe in. It's what I do. And every time I learn something new, and we're going to chat about that as well, then I put it on the course, because this is what other people can do as well, so that I'm not the only one in the Mentawai Islands surfing now. I can see Dave is there with me, and perhaps you, Craig, and whatever else we want to do, right? Those are the things that for us, we really want to create and drive. So I hope, Craig, that gives you your answer on that. It's easy enough to find them, but the thing is even though you find them, you've got to make sure they know what they're doing. And unless you know what they should be doing, you're not going to know that either.
Yeah, I think on that, I got an ad the other day for a Airbnb management company, and you can see they're off base. They're offering in-person welcoming and this whole hands-on service to the guests, and that's not what guests want. I don't want to be greeted. I don't want to get to the building and wait for someone to show up and give me a key. And you can see that there's some disconnect. So you got people, and sure, it's easy to go and say, we'll manage it, and we can get cleaning people in and can get them to welcome there. But is it the right product? Does it serve the market correctly? And I think if you don't go through the course, and it's one of the philosophies I have, is if I want to hire a marketing person, I'm going to go learn about marketing so I can hire the correct people. I want to be a C player so I can spot and identify where the A players are. And that's the thing. If you don't understand the basics, and I think there's a story I'll share. I was in PE at an event. I was speaking to a young lady. I think she was in her early 20s. She was a school teacher, and she had just bought an Airbnb from a management company. And she had never stayed in an Airbnb before. And she's like, I don't know how it works. I don't know. I'm not going to take your boyfriend, go to Plait and stay in an Airbnb and see what you're about to sell. Because if you don't understand the product, if you don't understand what the market wants, then you're not going to have that. You're not going to have a good experience. So,
and talking on that, I spend probably over 250 days every year in Airbnbs, whether they're my own or somewhere else. Like, I don't have a permanent resident address. So I'm in Airbnbs the whole time, sometimes for a month, sometimes for 3 nights. Like tomorrow, I move out of this one in Cape Town because I've got just a gap that I have to fill before I head over to Indo and all of that. So I've taken the best out of what I've seen around the world. And I filmed actually a lot of those Airbnbs that are like, I mean, there's that one video in the course that actually shows under the kitchen sink were the pots for the cooking, and in the pots were all the cockroaches in rice that had been left by the guest, and you'll actually see it. I show it in the course. Beautiful Airbnb, but obviously the cleaner didn't do a good job, didn't check everything right. And I show you. I go inside the cupboard and say, "Look inside here," and there you see the pot with dry rice. Obviously they hadn't cooked it, but in it were all these cockroaches walking around. So, it's like, that's what happens. And, I did give her a bad review. She was really trying hard, but those are the kinds of things you have to sort out and have all those, checklists in place. So like you said, go and do it yourself. If you don't know what the difference is that you can make in your own listing, then, well, you can at least learn from me. Then it'll all be there for you, right? And you can see that. So, 100%. Go for it. Okay. Interesting. I see some of the stuff there. I want to chat about this. So
Yeah.
I think I might have chatted about it before. I pulled this off my ceiling. It kind of looks like a little smoke detector, but this is a noise receiver or a monitor. So it goes onto the ceiling through a magnet, and it links to my Wi-Fi, and it measures the sound in the room. And if it goes above a certain threshold, in other words, 75 decibels, for a certain length of time, I get a message on my phone that says there is a noise alert. And it allows me to check to see what the noise is happening, how it looks, and allows me to then contact my guest and say, listen, is there a party going on or something not right? What's going on? It allows me to sort this out before it becomes an issue from my neighbors or the body corporate. So if you're in a building, you really need to have one of these things that are in place, because it's going to, save you the fines or save you from the body corporate coming and kicking you out. It also checks humidity, checks temperature. So all those different things are absolutely essential. Can actually even recognize how many cell phones are in the room. So if you want to make sure that there's not a party going on, then you want to have something like this. So I can say, hey, you've got 15 cell phones, which kind of implies that's a bit more than probably you should have in your apartment, whatever that looks like. Even for student houses. So for those of you investors who also have student houses and you're worried about student parties, all these kinds of things are absolutely important. And these are the kind of gadgets that we are now seeing come onto the market as such to make Airbnb or short-term letting a real legit thing. And I think that's really, really important, right? I mean, absolutely essential. So those are the kinds of things that I'm always looking at, like with electric locks, smart locks. For some reason, South Africa, we're not there with the smart locks. I get my smart lock. So a smart lock is, one, again, a lock on your door that integrates with my platform, knows with the software, so that it actually gives a guest a specific unique code for just their stay. And it does it automatically, right? So it means it's such a big relief that I don't have to go there and do key cards and a whole lot of other stuff. It's all done automatically. And it's a beautiful digital lock, but it connects to my Wi-Fi. I can open the lock from my phone. I can track to see who opened it, who didn't. It self-locks itself after a certain period of time. This is technology. And if you're not doing this, then you're going to wonder why you're not getting as much money as you could on Airbnb as we do there. And I explain all of this on the course as well, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm seeing a few more questions coming in, but Robin, do we maybe want to talk a little bit more around what the courses cover? We've got the two offerings that we'll talk about today. Do we want to do that first, and then we'll hit some of the questions?
Okay, so should we touch base on the two things as well?
Yeah, I think let's touch base on the free one, just for the guys who are curious about Airbnb, and then we can talk about, for the guys like Craig, who are very serious, knows what they want, then we can talk about the advanced course covers.
Yeah, sure. So, as an Airbnb host for 6-7 years now, or probably actually even longer, it was all about, well, we all have different needs. Some of us want to have extra cash flow. Some of us, and what I mean by extra cash flow is more cash every month. Doesn't matter if you have the property or own it. That's our rent-to-rent model, where you rent from a landlord and you list it on Airbnb and you make a profit on the difference. You pay the landlord the rent, but you make more money on Airbnb and you pocket the difference, which means you can literally start with very little money down. It's not like I have to have affordability. I have to have cash in my bank. I have to find another investor who can lend me a whole lot of money. This is done just literally by paying a deposit on something and you can get going, right? So some people are looking for cash flow, other for wealth creation, which is they actually want to buy for Airbnb. And I cover a whole lot of these different scenarios, how you start it, how you optimize it. If you've already got a portfolio or just one, or just even your house, and you want to check if you actually want to use your house for holiday let, or if you want to use a room in your house, which is very popular in many parts of the world, where actually you're living in your house and one of your rooms is for Airbnb guests. Like, yes, they walk through your lounge. They walk past your dining room table with your whole family there and they say, hello, have a good evening. That's very popular. A lot of people search out those experiences because they want to get to know the locals. Anyway, all those logistics depends on where you're at and what you're wanting. But the different kind of courses as such, giving you that real insight into the first one Dave mentioned, the free one. This is me saying, here are a whole lot of different models in how you can use Airbnb, from a flat in your property, like a granny flat, through to a room in your house, through to an apartment block, through to a farm that has guest houses, a whole lot of different options and actually show you them and show you their returns. So you can actually see that this is legit. This isn't just hearsay. And that really gives you a taste of, could this be something for you? Is Airbnb something that you want? Then we move into the next one, which we call part A, which is really around how do you list your Airbnb so that it stands out from everyone else. So you just have one, maybe it's existing, and you're saying, how do I improve this? The titles, the photographs, the descriptions, all those little things that really make it stand out, because we know that if you can stand out above your competition, you're going to generate more income. And the third part, the advanced course, is all about you're actually taking this a bit more seriously. And what I mean by more seriously is you could still just have one, but you're now actually saying, I want to earn some money out of this. I want to really actually jack this up. I want to automate it. And the advanced course is really strong in all that automation and how to expand. And that's how do I find new Airbnbs? How do I find them, check them, validate the income? How can I actually make an informed decision as opposed to, well, I hope that Airbnb works here, so let me just jump in and risk it. I'm like, no, we don't want to risk that. We actually want to check it, validate it, cross-reference, check the listings, and that I explain all around that, whether you've got one or whether you have this desire to expand it. And last week, Dave, we had Ridwan on our call with us. He started a year and a half ago, middle of COVID, started with just one. Now he's moving into, I think, about 10 or something million rand last year. Expanding at a massive rate, and everything is because he just did what the course told him to do, and that's really what we're opening up as a possibility. And I think that therefore caters for what people are wanting, right? And for me, and my belief about property investing is, something works, copy it. Someone else is doing something that works, copy it. And of course, if you've been given the step-by-step. No, I love talking about the scripting of Airbnb, right? The scripting of, if you have to go approach a landlord to convince a landlord to rent or let out the property to you so you can go and list it on Airbnb, that's quite new for a lot of landlords. But I give you the step-by-step script of what you need to say to them to increase your chances, because it's not just about, hey, landlord, I want to make lots of money on your property. Will you give it to me? And they're like, oh no, what about the damage? What about all this? What about that? I tell you how to answer all those questions, and it's all there for you step by step by step. And that's really, copy and paste what someone else is doing successfully.
100%.
Yep.
And I think one of the reasons I really like encouraging people to look at Airbnb, especially guys getting started, if you're struggling with affordability, it's that the rent-to-rent options there, so you don't get gapped by not having a job, not having bond affordability. And at the end of the day, most investors need to go for cash flow. So yeah, on a rent-to-rent, our downside is that we're not going to see that capital growth over the 4 or 5 year period. But that's at the same time one of the reasons we can get in there faster and start generating cash flow. And later we can generate cash flow, take it as a salary, and build affordability and start buying those properties later. But that immediate cash flow injection, I say immediate, but immediate by property standards, it's really good way to get in there and start seeing those returns early on, which is nice.
There's no other way, Dave, that I know that how you can start with such ease in property investing. Like,
yeah,
I don't know any other way. It's like and you don't even have to even see yourself as a property investor. If you just want to house hack your own home, if you just want to let out the little granny flat, maybe you're doing it in a long-term lease, you could turn that around and actually let it on Airbnb. I mean, in that free course, I actually show people how I did that here, on Bloberg. My first year of testing out Airbnb is that I just let it out over the holiday period, and that paid for the whole year's rent. I mean, insane. Yeah. I couldn't believe it, right? That got me hooked. So again, I wasn't really trying to dominate or anything. I just let me test this, and totally took me by surprise. And of course, that just blossomed into a whole new investing strategy for me. And of course, now that's all I'm doing, sharing it with other people, right? So simple as that.
No, yeah. 100%. Cool. Robin, if you're happy, then we can get back to some of the questions that we're getting in. There's quite a few. Craig had a small follow-up. So maybe to put this sort of framing for you. So Robin, is there a situation where you feel like being remote from your properties is a challenge? So Craig's talking about, there's an issue that I can't handle remotely. How do we get someone on the property to deal with this?
So I would use the same strategy regarding long-term rentals or short-term rentals. There's no ways I could go 45 days away from wherever I am if I didn't have systems in place. And that's just one of 5 trips this year. I've got a month in Spain. I've got another month in the US and Canada later on. I'm going to Mauritius again for 3 weeks in July. I'm going to be in J-Bay for another whole month from middle of May to middle of June. So I'm actually not going to be close to any of my properties, not just the Airbnb, but also a lot of my other rental properties. And of course, I've got in the US. And all of this is because I learned how to do the remote management early on, right? And not just as a last resort. And of course, that's what it's all about, is we need to have those systems in place. And with tech, we can actually find that more and more now. It's a bit like Uber, where we're actually, we can call transport on demand. In other words, we can actually say, I want to go from here to there. And using an app, we can find out what that looks like. And I use that for my Airbnbs or with my other long-term rentals. For example, I think it's like Get Todd, task on demand, is like, I need a carpenter now at this location, and it searches and says, there's a carpenter ready, they can be there in 30 minutes, and I can get it sorted. So none of this, I have to phone, when can you come out and fix my lock? Oh, only in 4 days' time. No, I want it now, just like Uber. I'm not going to try and find someone, I want it now. And those are the kinds of things that we put in place so that we can actually manage remotely, or even if it's next door. And my recommendation is, even if your properties are next door, learn to manage them as if you're not next door, because otherwise you're just going to be trapped in what I call your location. And location-based investing just means you can't do, kind of like have that free access to do those other things that you really wanted to do. And that for me is where some of that game changing happens. So that's what I would do. Figure it out, learn it, and then make it happen.
And you never know when a global pandemic is going to come along and make sure you can't go visit your properties for about 2 years.
Yep.
So for those of you guys that know, I've got property in the UK. I can't get to the UK. There's no way. Nothing I could do would ever get me to the UK in the past 24 months, almost more than the moment. And it's just at the end of the day, I have to have a team, and I've built it in such a way that my team's there and they run it. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to go and like, oh, well, the geyser burst. Not my problem. The systems are in place, the processes are in place. Worst case scenario, Robin, like you say, find someone on the app that's just get a plumber in there at last minute. And again, you've got the remote access. You can open the door for him and like just go in, stop the leak. Exactly. It all works together.
Yep.
100%. So Deirdre's got a question. Can you use Airbnb for a newly built cottage on your property? So yes, definitely.
Definitely. That sounds like a great option. I mean, we've got Julia who, maybe I'm thinking maybe 3 months ago, did the course. She converted her one little room that she had, an outside room, into Airbnb, and like literally it started paying for a lot of her house expenses and their bond. So she quickly converted the second one, and I think I posted on our group, on the Sapin and the Property Academy pages, and you can see her place. She's just like absolutely crushing it. And exactly, if you've got an outside cottage or something like that, definitely you should have a look at doing that, because you'd be surprised. I reckon an outside flatlet or granny cottage should pay for about 50 to 75% of your whole house's running costs, like your bond. It's like massive, really, really good. And of course, the thing that I like about it is if you do that, you can actually expense off a lot of your house running costs off that. So for example, if you have Wi-Fi, you're having to pay for that yourself at this moment if you're in your home. But if you have an Airbnb that's using that Wi-Fi, now you can actually expense the Wi-Fi off your income, right? Which means it's a whole different strategy. Your alarm system, your gardeners, your armed response, if that's what you've got. There's a whole lot of stuff you can now expense off, which before you would have to have paid with after tax income, which is heavy. Now it changes the game.
Yeah, and with the prefab market like it is, it's been grown in South Africa as well. I know in the US it's huge, but in South Africa there's also been good growth in that sector. You could go get a garden cottage put in the bottom of your garden or someone else's garden relatively quickly. It's generally, once it arrives, it's about a week, 2 weeks to get the foundations put down. You got to run some sewage and some water and electricity to the unit. That's the longest part, and then they drop the unit on the foundations, and you're finished. It's very quick and very efficient. And like you say, for that Airbnb unit to not only recoup its own expenses, but also contribute to the greater expenses of that property, could be really good. So in theory, you could also go to other people and not only rent their properties, but rent space on their property and go drop a unit down there. So it's a really good opportunity, and the market's very well built for it at the moment. Cool. Robin, this question's come up twice, so I don't want to ignore it. It feels like it might be a bit of an ad. So linen rentals. There's obviously companies out there that will lease linen to you as an Airbnb host. Is this the first service that you've seen? Is it a service you want to make use of? If not, why not?
So I think two things. What's an interesting fact is the person has mentioned here, like Pranut Linen. Well, that's my cousin. So Charles and Danny De Beer are my cousin from my dad's side. I was speaking to them again this morning. So what we're referring to as linen rentals is that actually someone will lend or rent the linen to you for that booking, and then either collect it or drop it off. In other words, for the next one. So you're actually now renting linen per bed. In other words, the package comes with pillows, or your duvet cover, your duvet, your fitted sheet, your bath towel, etc. And that is like seen as one bed. And then you pay probably between 90 to 100 Rand for the rental of that. Which, if you actually think about it, that's nearly what you're being charged if you go to a laundromat to go and wash that. The beauty of this, and this is why this is actually a really good moment to bring this up, is the biggest risk to me in my Airbnbs is the cleaning, and of the cleaning, it's the linen. Yep. Because no one looks at the linen as closely as I'm assuming you would to see if there's stains, marks, whole range of things, damage, etc. And that for me is my biggest nightmare, is a guest phoning me to say, this linen is stained, it hasn't been washed, or it's not washed properly, or is really not right. And that's it. My Airbnb, my reviews are going to take a plummet. And of course, that's just not the professionalism that I'm wanting. So we are actually shifting over to a lot of the linen rental process now. It actually comes out nearly the same cost as if I had to clean it all myself. But there's the added element here, which is it's going to be checked and actually is of a better quality than I probably would have got for myself, because I just don't have those big roller irons. If someone does my linen, they have to sit there with this little iron, and it's not going to come out as great as like a hotel would. So I'm actually more and more of a fan of the the rental linen companies out there. The biggest challenge is always going to be the logistics of getting and taking back. Now, for Newt, for example, and I know they actually, part of their costing is the delivery. So if you're in Cape Town at this moment, whether you're a sea point, waterfront, town, and far as up to probably, I think, maybe even Salt Riverside, it's actually free, that delivery. Now, it's on the day they'll come and drop off the linen and then pick up the dirty linen, which is incredible, right? That kind of process. I mean, how great. So I would definitely look into it. The challenge is always going to be if something like that's not around. My suggestion, and you'll see this in the course, I tell you what linen to get, how to get it. You'll need 3 sets of linen per bed, just to ensure that the rotation cycle means you don't get stranded with suddenly nothing left. Yeah. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to look at 100%.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, the other value add there is they're going to be worried about the quality and the product, and they're not going to bring you back linen that's damaged. And in your situation at the moment, we'll get the 3 sets of linens, which means if one is damaged, we then need to replace that. And if 2 sets are damaged, then we're starting to run into some issues with that logistics. So it's definitely see the value in it. Yep. And I think if the pricing's reasonable, then, like you say, I've seen laundry services for 180 Rand for a bed set. So
exactly, 5 kilos, that's it. 100 Rand, 120 Rand for the cheap place, and it's like, wow, actually, it works out nearly the same. And then sometimes they say, sure, come, we're busy today, so collect in 3 days' time. I'm like, oh, it's not going to work for me.
No. Yeah, 100%. That's good. So we did briefly discuss this, but maybe just to cover it again, Robbie Black's asking about Fidelity Fund certificates and the new PPRA. I believe, Robin, we agreed that we're not of the opinion it's not going to affect us as Airbnb hosts. We run our own companies, and our companies are trading.
Yeah, and also we collect money. We don't hold money. So there's that liability of, do we have to have funds and responsibilities and auditing? Well, none of that, because Airbnb collects and they just pay it out to us when the guest is there. All the details, we actually don't need to know any of those details, et cetera, of who our guests are, what it looks like. We're not even initially claiming that we're professionals, I guess, in that perspective, because it falls under a slightly different dynamic. Robbie, if you're talking more about some of the legalities on it, it's going to be very interesting in South Africa over the next years, just to see how our kind of legal side start to view the Airbnbs. We know that hotels and bed and breakfasts who've had to re-license their their premises or to get zoning departures, etc. Well, that hasn't really applied to short-term letting. And I know that even some of the partners for SAPN, the legal team talk about this at different levels, but I think we're still okay for many, many years before this becomes an issue for us. So, it's a growing market, and I think it's still safe as long as also we as Airbnb hosts are responsible. Because I read something today, Dave, which is also very interesting, that especially in places like the US, the Californian side of it, where it actually costs now more to stay in Airbnbs than in luxury hotels, because you have occupancy taxes, cleaning costs to clean a whole house because of labor shortage is just so expensive, as well as your overnight stay. It's just people are saying, Airbnb, you're shooting yourself in the foot because you're starting to charge too much, becoming greedy. And we're seeing that. I don't think it's going to happen in South Africa for a while, but it's just an interesting thing to keep watching.
Yeah, 100%. But the market's maturing, which is always good to see. Question from Umfo over here. Given that the course is all online, what sort of in-person hand-holding coaching post the online course do we talk about, Robin?
So there are a couple of ways in which people can reach out. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing for me to say that we actually have very few people reach out, because I like to think of it as whatever you've learned, and actually you don't have a lot of questions. But even if you do that, then in the course, you'll be told how to send me the link so that you can join the Airbnb groups that we have that therefore actually do answer those questions. And remember, you've got lifetime access to the course, which means even if you get it now, you can watch it later on. It's not like it's going to expire. And of course, it does mean that if you have a question, well, there's the Facebook group where you can actually say, listen, this is what I'm looking for, what I need. Does anyone have a suggestion, or does anyone have a cleaning company in PE that they could recommend? So there is all that kind of resource. It's obviously a private group. It's not open to everyone, because we want to have people who are serious and who actually are going to, give back to the community, as in with other people who are as serious around that. We've realized, Dave, and I'm sure you've seen it as well in all the kind of courses that you create and promote. There's a difference between people who are just curious and then those that are serious. And the people who are serious are actually very generous in their sharing of knowledge and content. And of course, that forms such a great community to be part of, because that generates that wealth that we're actually talking about. Our wealth is not just in the money we're earning, but actually in the community that we're building around us. And I think that's where the difference lies, and that would be that avenue. The other way, of course, is they could just ask a question on the SAPN Facebook page and on the groups there. And in that SAPN Hub, I'm part of it. I sometimes see the questions, and I'll certainly share what I can at that point. So there are quite a few ways that you're never all alone in this journey.
And I think it's just one of the things, because we had a premier event in Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, and Redwood was there, and we're talking very in depth about Airbnb. Coaching's great, but it does sort of mean you become reliant on that person. So all the knowledge is there. The course is very comprehensive, very practical, and that's nice. And if you've got questions, that's where the support channels are. There's the WhatsApp groups, SAP and TPA, the Property Academy's got email, like support webinars, but networking with the right people is just as important. That's why Redwan's hit every city that we've done an event in so far, because he's out there networking, meeting the right people. And if you can go in and spend time with those guys face to face, it's really important. And Robin, I forgot that you were actually at the Cape Town event. But it was good. It was good to have you there, and we can sit there and we can talk.
I was just sitting in the back, just watching and listening, and quite happy just to actually have a bit of peace and see who was out there than actually trying to answer everyone's questions. So it worked for me as well.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. I'm not seeing any other questions. So if you guys do have some other questions, we can go through there. Otherwise, I'm going to reshare the links for the free Airbnb course and the advanced Airbnb course. If you have any other questions, you can always email us. These recordings will continue to exist on the Facebook channels for a couple more minutes. Sorry, a couple more days. You can still go find them on the YouTube and everything like that. Robin, while we're waiting for a last question or two, is there anything else you want to leave as a parting message for everyone?
I was just actually looking over some of the messages, and there was one question there which I think Papalele asked around the criteria used to find great Airbnbs. Well, there are certain websites out there that actually can validate for you the possible or predictive income that you could get once you list it. You put in the address, you say how many rooms, how many bathrooms, how many guests, and it tells you to a high degree of accuracy what kind of annual income you can get if you list that property on Airbnb. So that's a really great way for you to check something. If you think, oh, this looks like a great place for me to do Airbnbs, well, firstly, I say go onto Airbnb and have a look if there are other Airbnbs in the area, because that means that there's some kind of a demand. And then I go to the other websites and I type in the address and I put in the details, and it actually confirms with me that, hey, I could actually be making some good money, or this doesn't look like it's worth my while, so then I'll just let that go. So it really gives me the tools to make an informed decision as opposed to something, that's just guesswork. So again, I don't like guesswork. I like to know what's happening, and that's why it's successful. That's why people, our students are actually doing really well. And this is around the country, right? It's not just Cape Town. We've got them in Joburg, Pretoria, Bloem, P, Durban. Lots of areas where people are saying, let's make this work. And I keep saying it's growing. 5 years ago, I said it was growing, and we've seen that expansion. And what we're seeing more and more is that with the flux of people who are now doing Airbnb, if you're already at the top, if you already have 75 reviews, good reviews, of course, someone's going to choose you compared to someone who's just starting. And that's where I keep saying, get in there, get it sorted now, make sure you're on top. So you're building that momentum, because once that's in place, you're just going to keep reaping those rewards. And, I talk about that, the startup strategy, very specific strategy on how we start up. You don't just go list it and hope. You set your pricing at a certain amount. You create reviews that are really particular. I actually ask for certain reviews. I say, listen, please let us know how you like the Wi-Fi. Please let us know in your review how you like the views. So I'm tailoring my guests' reviews. I'm not just randomly talking about it. During COVID, I actually said, please leave us a review so that other travelers know they can trust my place during times like COVID. So the guest is going to leave, fantastic, spotless, all those things that the guests were looking for. So again, don't leave this to chance. If you don't know what you're doing, well, then you can't expect great results.
Yeah, 100%. It's always going in. I'm seeing one last question squeezing in. How do you go about getting repair quotes when guests end up damaging stuff, especially when it's odd things like a burn on a sofa?
So burn on a sofa, I don't know what kind of burn, but if it's more like replaceable, well, you just go online, you get what would it cost for you to buy a new one, and you can submit that. Because that could be a possible replacement of the whole sofa. And on Airbnb, you can actually choose different ways of proving something. You can say, here is the link for the sofa that I now have to replace. And of course, they will see that, and that's validation on its own. Or you then obviously have to get an upholsterer to come and give you a quote, and that obviously just takes a bit more time. So depending on that kind of damage, it's sometimes like it's easier just to replace. Like I had on one of my kitchen tables, we had cigarette stains. I don't know how they did that, but it was a very simple. There's no ways I'm going to repaint this, so it's just a new table. Put the link for the new table, same table, replaceable. And Airbnb paid it out. They said, sure, no problem. Here's the money just to buy it. It was took 20 minutes and it was done. So that's the beauty, of the Airbnb damage policy. Remember, there's $1 million per booking of damage policy, and it really is very, very supportive to know that. I mean, I've had obviously linen replaced, glasses, lamps, tables. I had someone actually put their fist through a toilet door, and all that stuff gets covered. So I feel very relaxed and safe in that I'm not going to get messed around and have money lose. I'm not going to lose money. Of course, if a geyser goes because the geyser's old, that's not a damage. Then you just go to the landlord if you're doing a rent to rent and say your geyser has gone, so please replace it.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those things. It comes from experience, and I know it's something we discuss on the course as well. It's some things are replaceable. Sometimes we just go and replace the whole thing. Sometimes we can do things in such a way to rather avoid a full replacement. I know one of the products I use up in the UK with my furnished units. We only use furnishers that have got replaceable covers. So like Carcraft's good at it here in South Africa, so you can go and buy a new cover for the chair fairly quickly, and that replacement, so you don't have to replace the whole chair. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to go to Airbnb and say they destroyed it and we have to replace the whole thing. And by the way, I've also now lost 2 days of occupation because of that, so thanks.
Correct.
Otherwise, Robin, I think that's good. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through. Thank you for your time. It's been good to have these sessions. If everyone wants more of these, let us know. We can always bring Robin onto a coffee chat or something like that. Any last things to just share from Robin, just in case I'm missing something?
Everyone usually talks about, taking action. The moment is now. I think if you haven't got that yet, then it sounds like a lot of people are curious, and it's a great thing to be curious because that's the start of how everything goes. But if there's any hesitation or doubt, then I just err on taking action and letting unfold from there. So we've seen enough proof of how Airbnb works, and you and I chatted. It's one of these models which allows us to get going and started on something with the least amount of risk than any other property investing that I know. Even just like giving money to another investor to invest on my behalf is a risk because I have no way of getting that back. And I love to be in control. And this is just such a great way to be, in control and to make it work. And for me, I want, choice of time and then funds. And this is the main way for me to go and create that. And of course, that's what unfolds. So a really great opportunity. As I say, if people want to reach out, they can certainly reach out. Once we're in the kind of course, we talk about it, we share the stuff. People aren't alone, and I think that's really where it is. It's the fastest growing investment model. We've seen it worldwide. REITs are starting to create funds specifically to buy short-term rental buildings, and there are all those complaints, Dave. We've seen that as well. Like Airbnb is forcing out residents because people are buying homes now to Airbnb, which means people don't have a place to live. So there's those kinds of complaints. So it's like there should be proof that something's going to be happening here, and why not just join in and dominate as opposed to watch and regret, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of those things that people pick up, especially in the Airbnb space, is we're late and it's happening already, and we've missed the bus. You haven't. There's still time. There's still people making some very easy mistakes to be better and improve the market and provide a better quality of service to the clients. And that's it. At the end of the day, we're going into a market, we're providing a product, and you can still go out there. And if you got something that you can add that's unique, that also adds value and goes through there. So there's always opportunity to go into and disrupt and upset the ones who are resting on their laurels. So that's what we're talking about here.
And I think as well in that, Dave, I see one of the comments here from Megan. I met Megan a couple of weeks ago, and she was actually sharing she's got an apartment in Greece, and she had a bad experience with I think it was probably a tenant of some sort, and it just didn't work out well. So there are a lot of people out there who have had bad experiences. And again, if you know what to put in place and you have the right systems in place, that can turn around, and you can actually turn that bad experience into something really positive, which now funds a whole lot of your travels and a whole lot of other things. So even for those people out there who may have got burnt in some way around Airbnb or in other kind of letting, then maybe you should relook at that. I was surprised to actually have met some people who didn't know that you could claim damage from Airbnb. They thought they had to do it all themselves. So for the last 3 years, they've been paying themselves for all their damage. So when I told them that actually you can claim back a significant, like up to $1 million, obviously depending on the damage, they were like, really? Could we do that? I'm like, wow, you need to really be informed. Otherwise, you're losing money. And I don't want to lose money.
100%. Awesome. Robin, thanks so much. These have been great.
Good.
These have been great.
Till the next time, everyone else, we'll see you on the course.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And if you want a Robin booth back again for one of these, let us know. Always, if we can, rope Robin in wherever he is around the world. Now Robin's traveling again, so this becomes a little.
We'll have to check our time zones now.
We'll have to deal time zones again, but it's always going to be good. Thanks so much, Robin. Always appreciate having you on. Guys, the links are in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can always email support@sapropertynetwork.com. Thanks, Robin.